Hi guys, it's Reagan and welcome back to another video. I am in another temporary filming situation and I appreciate your patience with me during this time. My house is currently getting painted, so I had to set up like a new little area for the time being. Nonetheless, I'm so excited about today's video because I'm going to be going over my top 10 favorite middle grade fantasy books. I've been a long-time reader. I've always loved reading, and middle grade, especially middle grade fantasy, has always been a huge part of my life, both in childhood and throughout my adulthood as well. I love middle grade for its charming stories, its impactful characters, and just its ability to sweep you away to new and fantastic places. So today I've comprised my current favorite lists, a top 10 list, talking about my favorite middle grade fantasy stories. It's definitely a good mix of childhood favorites and new favorites I've also found along the way. But without further ado, let's go ahead and dive right in. These are in no particular order, so it was already hard enough to narrow down to a top 10. So let's go ahead and chat about them. So the first book that is on my list is Nevermoor by Jessica Townsend. This is a new middle grade fantasy series that I honestly feel like has the potential to be like one of the new all-time greats. This is planned to be 10 books, and just the growth and escalation that's already happened within the plot, I can just kind of see the long game that Jessica Townsend is going to bring us along, which I feel like we're going to watch the characters grow up, and the plot itself is going to slowly get darker and darker as the characters themselves get older. In this story, we follow our main character, Morgan Crow, and she is cursed. She's blamed for every bad or unlucky thing that befalls the town, anyone who lives there, and she's also been told that she's destined to die on her 11th birthday. But at midnight on her 11th birthday, a very unusual man appears and basically sweeps her away to this unknown, very magical place called Nevermoor. Here, this man is like a famous ship captain, a ship captain of the skies, and he also runs this magical hotel that basically transforms itself to whatever needs the guests may have. And now Morgan Crow lives in this hotel with Jupiter North and makes all different types of friends and acquaintances, as well as Morgan Crow from there enters the trials to become a part of the same secret society that Jupiter North himself is a part of. We see competition, we see magical skills, we see her making friends, we also see magical education, as well as a bunch of kids basically having to work together to overcome evil forces that are threatening the town in which they live in. I have loved all 3 books that have released so far in this middle grade series. I've given them all 5 stars. They're engrossing, they're entertaining. I can't wait for the next installment, and each book just grows on itself so beautifully. The next recommendation I have is another newer release and the first book to a new middle grade fantasy series that I just feel like is going to be incredible through and through. Not only was the first book amazing and so original, but just you can see the blueprint of what is to come, and that is Amari and the Night Brothers by B.B. Alston. This book was spectacular from beginning to end, and the audiobook is also amazing, but this follows our main character Amari, and she has never given up hope that her older brother Quentin is still alive, despite what her parents and what everyone around her is trying to tell her. So when she discovers a ticking briefcase in her older brother Quentin's closet, she opens it knowing it is left for her. And she discovers in this briefcase that her brother has actually nominated her to try out for the very secretive Bureau of Supernatural Affairs, and Amari decides to go headfirst into this audition, hoping to discover the secrets of what has happened to her missing brother. Once she arrives, she's thrown headfirst not only into trials to get into this bureau, but she also realizes that so many of the other students have been preparing for this their entire lives and are part of these long, illustrious magical families. She also realizes things like ghosts and other types of supernatural creatures and magic and all sorts of things also exists. And as she's beginning to take her classes, she also realizes that the conspiracy that is surrounding her brother's disappearance is growing larger and is directly associated with the Bureau itself, because Quentin was actually one of their most successful agents. I loved that this is like kind of a school setting, but it's also this like Bureau of Supernatural Affairs, so it has this like CIA secret agent feeling to it as well. But obviously our main characters are learning not only about their magic, making friends, fitting in, and of course trying to solve this larger mystery surrounding her loved ones. B.B. Alston also weaves in so many wonderful and personal touches within this book as well. It's endearing. I love Amari so much, and I can't wait for the next book within this series. The next few books I'm going to chat about are some older school favorites, books I still love to this day, and many of them I've actually recently reread in the past few years, but also I loved them so much when I was a kid. The first is the Golden Compass series by Philip Pullman. This is a series I am like currently in the midst of rereading, and wow, does this hold up 100%. This series is so dark, and the dialogue that Philip Pullman is trying to have around like science, religion, and government is just wild. Honestly, I feel like I'm getting more out of it now as an adult than I did when I was a kid, but I loved this series growing up so much. It was one of the first series I feel like I read that really was like, I need to think about this. Like, I need to write a paper about this. My 6th grade self was like, I need to write some paragraphs about this Philip Pullman series. But the His Dark Material series is a trilogy. The first one, The Golden Compass or The Northern Lights, depending on where you're from, follows our main character, Lyra. And Lyra is a very adventurous girl. She's hard to nail down. She's always kind of exploring and getting herself in trouble. She's also been raised in this sort of educational monk religion like place, and at the beginning of the book she's basically sent to the north to kind of meet up with her explorer father, and she's so excited because she wants to be an explorer just like him. Along the way though, Lyra kind of finds herself in the midst of this larger political conspiracy. There's basically children going missing in this land, and one of her best friends, Roger, is actually taken, and she has vowed that she is going to save him. But as she kind of dives deeper into this really harrowing mystery, she quickly realizes that she doesn't know who to trust, but she does make alliances along the way. The first one is so fast-paced. There's so much there to talk about. It's extremely violent and very intense, but the actual series itself continues to balloon past the first book. There's a concept essentially introduced about parallel worlds and things throughout the first novel. It's really broken open in later installments. There's other characters and other places we're introduced to as well, and it's truly excellent, and I'm loving my reread right now. I loved it when I was a kid. One of my favorite middle grade fantasy series for life. The next book I'm going to chat about, I'm sure a lot of you have also read, as for many it was required reading in school, and that is The Giver Quartet by Lois Lowry. I loved The Giver. I loved reading it in class. I loved it so much that I immediately reread it after finishing it for school, and then read all the other books within the quartet itself. And honestly, I still feel like The Giver Quartet is one of my favorite series, middle grade or not, in my life. I think about it all the time. It really stayed with me when I was a kid, and it just was one of like my favorite things to have ever read at that time, and I just have this soft spot for it in my heart forever. But the entire quartet is so good, and it's interconnected in such a fascinating way. But the first one, The Giver, a very famous book, follows our main character Jonas. He lives in a community that from the surface seems very ideal. Everyone is content, everyone is happy. But on the flip side of that, everything is colorless, and you don't really have the option to make decisions for yourself. You're assigned a job that you'll have for the rest of your life. You have your family, but things like emotions and memories aren't really a part of the experience of living within this community. Jonas's life is forever changed when he is given his life assignment, and that is to be the giver, which is essentially the lone individual within the community that is responsible for housing all of the memories and emotions of this singular place. And obviously, as Jonas begins to see and feel, his world is forever changed around him, and he's really unable to go back. This concept really blew my 6th grade mind, and honestly, I think the book absolutely stacks up to this day. Also, Lois Lowry really explores different types of community and community obligation throughout all of the books within the quartet. They're so good. I love them so much. I reread them about 5 years ago, and honestly, I already want to go back to them. One of my all-time favorites for sure. Next shouldn't be too much of a surprise, and I'm sure would make many of your lists as well, and that is Percy Jackson. What can I say? Percy Jackson was my life's blood growing up, and I really want to do a marathon reread of the first 5 books very soon. I have read, I want to say, all of Rick Riordan's releases, especially associated to the Percy Jackson world. I actually grew up with the release of these books, and the anticipation of waiting for the next installment of Percy Jackson and the Olympians was so painful, and the competition at the library was fierce. And then obviously, as the next round of series began to be released, honest. I always have just kept up with them my entire life, but Percy Jackson and the Olympians particularly holds a very special place in my heart. But obviously, this is a middle grade adventure series following our main character, Percy. Percy is a good kid. He has a hard time concentrating at school. He has a hard time keeping up with his studies. He has dyslexia, and a lot of his teachers get very frustrated with him. But at the beginning of book 1, Percy finds out that he's actually a demigod, meaning his father is a god from one of the Greek gods. And from here, he's now sent to this very special summer camp where he has learned to not only harness and utilize his powers, but also he's kind of thrown headfirst into a variety of quests in a very classic Greek fashion to do both the god's bidding, but also to try to save the world. This is a series beloved by many, and I am one of them. It's the magic, the friendship, the coming of age component of Percy Jackson and the Olympians I love so much. I loved all of the characters in this. Annabeth Chase was like my personal hero. Percy was adorable. That fumbling idiot I could not help but to root for, and he was like one of my favorite fictional characters of all time. Also, kind of reading this series as I was the same age as the characters was a really special experience as well. Kind of this anticipatory, like, we're back at camp, like what's gonna happen this year sort of vibe was just a delight. Obviously, rereading these books as an adult will be a different experience, but honestly, I feel like Rick Riordan's writing is just so captivating. His inclusion of mythology and just his overall storytelling ability is fun, and I know I will love it to this day. Percy Jackson is just one of those series that will always have a space in my heart. I loved it so much. It is a foundational series for me. Next up, I actually have 2 series that fall under the Rick Riordan Presents umbrella, which is such an incredible umbrella of books that basically focus on mythology from all around the world, from different cultures, and so many incredible stories are coming out all of the time, and I have found so many new favorites. And one of them is Tristan Strong Punches a Hole in the Sky by Kwame Mabalia. This is another recent read for me, but wow, did it make an impact. From the writing to the story to just the overall pacing of this book, I was captured immediately. The emotions, just everything I felt while reading this. It is truly just one of the best middle grade fantasy books I've read in a long time. This follows our main character Tristan Strong. In book 1, he is feeling anything but strong due to the recent passing of his best friend, which he blames himself for. His family, obviously deeply concerned for him and hoping to give him some space to grieve, decide to send him to his grandparents' house for the summer. However, once he arrives there, a strange creature appears in his window and actually steals his best friend's journal, the only thing he has left to remember him by. In his effort to get this journal back and chasing him through his grandparents' farm, Tristan Strong stumbles upon a very strange tree and then accidentally punches a hole in the sky, opening a portal to another world called the Mid-Pass. Here, the Black American gods are exhausted after a long fight against their enemies, and now Tristan Strong kind of finds himself in the midst of this conflict and also trying to make his way back home. This is just such a fantastic series. First and foremost, Tristan Strong as a main character is a delight. The author also includes so many wonderful things I just love to see in middle grade, from the discussion of emotions, talking about therapy, and obviously grief is such a big component of this book too. But we see Tristan take on so many different challenges and persevere. He's strong, he's smart, he's talented, and he also is learning to rely more on himself and also believe in himself more, and that story was beautiful to see. Storytelling within this book is also very central to the plot, specifically focusing on tales that are tied to African folklore, which is also tied to slavery and American history. This concept of sharing stories and sharing culture, even in moments that might be painful, but still remembering and celebrating one's past and one's history, is so important to the story as well. It's incredible. I loved book 1 in this series. I can't wait to carry on. Just so many things about this book make it amazing, and it's for sure one of my favorites. The next series I have to talk about is Aru Shah and the End of Time by Roshni Chakshi. This is just truly one of the most delightful and fun and hilarious middle grade series I have truly ever read. Another one that centers mythology and adventure, but this one specifically follows Indian mythology. In this story, we follow our main character, Aru Shah. She has the habit habit of stretching the truth just a bit in hopes of fitting in a bit more at school. And while her classmates are jetting off to their next exciting vacation during autumn break, Aru will be spending it at home with her mom at the Museum of Ancient Indian Art. One day, a few students from Aru's school show up on her doorstep hoping to catch her in a lie. They don't believe her and her claims that one of the lamps within the museum is actually cursed and dare her to light it to prove that she is not lying. Aru decides that this will be her final fib. She's going to follow through and she's never going to tell a lie again. But when she lights the lamp, things go from bad to worse. Not only does she accidentally release the sleeper, an ancient demon whose duty it is to awaken the god of destruction, but also everyone in Aru's life, from her mother to her classmates, are frozen in time, and it's up to Aru to save them all. And from there, we follow Aru as she goes on a quest to not only save the world from this demon that she's accidentally released. You see her, of course, again, make friends, encounter her magic, begin to believe in herself in ways that she could never imagine. Kind of this really classic quest structure, which I personally really love in middle grade stories. But what really shines in Arusha on the End of Time is the humor in Aru Shah herself. This book is hilarious. I found myself laughing out loud left and right, and also just like the modern twist that the author puts on so many different encounters is just delightful. Like, for example, they end up in like a magical Costco, which is just so funny to me. I've read many books in this series. All of them not only get better as the plot itself grows on each other, but just the characters and the humor just continue to persist, and it's just truly so much fun. Next up, I have a very long and very beloved series. I've actually read all of the books. I'm up to date with this particular series, and it's one that I can't wait for the next installment to come out in, and that is Keeper of the Lost Cities by Shannon Messenger. This is a middle grade series, not for the faint of heart, because it is long. I want to say there are 9 books out now, and I think there's going to be a total of like 10 to 11, and each book is actually rather long as well. But if you're looking for a series where you're really going to see a huge cast of characters kind of grow in their powers, tackle a huge, dark, and dangerous power, and kind of graduating into different grades as you follow them in their magical education, this is a great series to check out. It is long, but there's a lot of development there, and there's so many characters and storylines for you to fall in love with. But in book 1, we meet our main character, Sophie, and she has been hiding a secret her entire life, and that is that she is a telepath. She's always thought she was kind of alone in this sort of magical ability, and she's been hiding it from everyone around her entire life. And Sophie's world is turned upside down when one day, while on a school field trip, she runs into a boy named Fitz who can also read minds. And from there, she discovers that 1, she's not alone in her magical abilities, and there's actually lots of other individuals out there who have their own unique power, but 2, she's not actually human at all, but in fact an elf. And in a blink of an eye, Sophie is whisked away to this new magical place because, with the discovery of her power, put her and her family into grave danger from a dark force that's kind of threatening the elven society as we know it. And so begins a very long series of not only watching Sophie discover her powers, kind of learn more about her birth parents and their past, and kind of confronting aspects of this elven society that might not be as good as they look from the outside. There's lots of conspiracy, there's kind of evil plots at play. There's also this really interesting relationship, I feel like, between the adults in this book and the kids, in that the kids have a lot of autonomy, fight and protect about what they're interested in, and not everyone is perfect. I feel like there's a lot of discussion about different types of family dynamics, and you see a lot of different types of relationships and friendships as well. Again, this is a really long series, so a lot of stuff has kind of happened throughout the 9 books that have been released, but you will fall in love with the characters and the world. It's magical and really, really fun, and definitely one of my favorite fantasy middle grade series out there. Next up is a series that I just think is one of the most delightfully written, and that is The Girl Who Circumnavigated Fairyland in a Ship of Her Own Making, or the Fairyland series by Catherine M. Valente. This to me is like the pinnacle of middle grade fantasy writing. Like, when I want a weird, quirky quest story, like, my mind always goes back to this particular series because it's just delightful and whimsical and weird, and honestly everything I love. But this follows our main character, September, and she longs for adventure. So when the green wind and taking the form of a man in a green jacket, invites her to go on an adventure in Fairyland, she immediately accepts. And she's basically from there whisked away to this magical place where lots of children kind of have adventures there. But September herself is not interested in just kind of an ordinary experience in an extraordinary place, especially when she discovers that there's lots of things that she finds confusing about Fairyland itself. Particularly, it seems to be ruled by this one individual who's creating lots of rules and bureaucracy that's hurting a lot of the residents of Fairyland. So she decides to go on an adventure to confront this evil Marquess, overthrow her from her grip of power on Fairyland itself. And this is, again, the first book to a series, so a lot of things are developed from here, and kind of the ideas and what's constructed, not only from the pure originality of a lot of the places and characters you see within this story and the writing, which is just so delightful, but a lot of the concepts around childhood and what it means to kind of be whisked away from home, and perhaps what you take for granted as it relates to your home and your family. My favorite concept is this feeling of what do you do now that you've been introduced to something beyond what you thought was possible from a reality standpoint. And that is what's really delved into within this book and later books in the series, and it's just so good. If you want something that's a little darker in tone, but truly that whimsical middle grade vibe, this is the best book to pick up. Also, the audiobooks are fantastic. This really has this feeling of this fairy tale, as you would imagine. We're in Fairyland, so it really has that feeling as you're consuming the book. It feels sort of ageless, like this could have been written 300 years ago or yesterday. It's kind of hard to pinpoint, but it is amazing. And the last book that is on my top 10 favorite middle grade fantasy list is A Wrinkle in Time. And this is another book that I actually have reread recently and loved just as much the second time around. This is a book, again, I read growing up, and it blew my mind. The concept, the idea of this series was just mind-boggling to me at the time, and with a reread, I still have a lot of appreciation and respect for that story. But yeah, A Wrinkle in Time absolutely blew my socks off when I was 11 years old when I read it the first time. But this is a fantastic story that follows our main character, Meg, and she is a high school student. Basically, at the beginning of this book, she is transported through time and space and is forced to go on this wild adventure with her brother and her friend in hopes of finding and saving her scientist father. This has to do with parallel worlds. It has to do with like time and space. Just the concepts were just riveting to me when I read it, but honestly, again, really hold up. The plot is really fast-paced. The writing is incredible and very, very imaginative. This is also the first book to a series, and I highly recommend continuing to read the books outside of A Wrinkle in Time. But this was one that I also feel like is better to kind of go in blind a bit because the plot is so kind of out there as you're going along. But of course, it's so much about love and family and also finding yourself and kind of coming into yourself. We love a coming of age tale. And of course, defeating dark powers that are holding her father hostage in a faraway place. This is my last favorite book, and honestly, an all-time great in my opinion. But yes, that is the last book that is on my list. Alrighty guys, I hope you guys enjoyed. But those are my top 10 favorite middle grade recommendations. Please let me know down below some of your favorite middle grade reads. I honestly feel like I could have made this book many times over. This was very hard for me to narrow down, and I didn't include so many all-time greats that I still want to talk about. But nonetheless, I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I will see you soon with another one soon. Goodbye.